You're alive.
Music means on? I didn't hear music. Are we
I
not
did.
doing
We're live.
music anymore, Bob?
We're live.
We're live. All right. Welcome to Wall Street Beats, everybody. I'm Steve Lamar. I'm joined by our oil and gas pro, Bob Morris, which is apropos for today, given the events of the weekend. Blockade, schmockade. The market doesn't seem to care, Bob. What are your thoughts? I see I see this being like a rocket and a feather. The price of oil and everything, and gas prices and inflation is kind of rocketing higher, and it's going to take some time for this to all come back to earth when this
Yeah,
thing resolves itself. We hope.
we hope. This is continuing to play out as we had said all along that this is sort of a can of worms. It's not going to be resolved easily. And the Iranian regime, where there's been no regime change and doesn't appear to be any major regime change on the cusp anytime soon, is digging in their heels, and their playbook for the past 20 plus years is the stall, stall, stall. And
Yeah.
as you've seen, they came to the table last week with some demands that they weren't willing to back off on. They're far apart from what the U.S. is demanding here. And we had said a week ago, we said, well, this 2 week ceasefire we kind of view as a 2 week pause. We'll see what happens here. And now that the talks have broken down, the next step, as everyone knows, is a blockage or blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which is supposed to have started 3 minutes ago or 10 a.m. this morning. So,
Yep.
and we have yet to see sort of what that entails. If it's a full blockage like was originally indicated, where no ships go in and out, period, or whether it's really just a blockade of ships going in and out of Iranian ports, we'll see. But part of it was also reported that it may be an all in and all out. In other words, they sort of let ships through and then block everything and then let ships through, but it continued to block anything going in and out of Iranian ports. So we'll see sort of how that plays out. But clearly the U.S. is serious. I think this is a less onerous step than trying to take over Karg Island, which would be much more difficult.
Yep.
So, it appears the Trump administration said, look, rather than going full force and take over Karg Island, let's just do a blockade, sort of put the economic pressure on Iran and hope that we can possibly return to the table. Now, in the meantime, Iran has said they would retaliate against all the other Arab nation ports in the region. And there's also the risk that the Houthis could step up and block the Bab al-Mandab Strait, which is another strait which about 17% of the world's oil flows through. So there's still risk here, and we'll see if Iran follows through on their threat of attacking other neighbor Arab nation ports or not, and whether they have the firepower to do so. And we know they've continued to fire missiles, that it's impossible to sort of take out every missile, behind every little blockade or home or whatever in Iran. So,
Yep.
and this is still a very tense situation. Oil's
Aren't
up sharply.
aren't we
Back
getting
above.
close to? I was gonna say, aren't we getting close to having to these guys having to shut these wells in? I mean, they can't stay like this for very much longer, can they? And then when that
Well,
happens, things get really bad really fast. No.
and it depends on the geology, but I don't know. We don't know how much of their storage is full. If they continue to let the wells flow, how much goes into storage, how much still goes into tankers on the water. And the geology is such, if you shut in the wells, they have to be shut in for a while before you begin to damage them to where when you turn them back on, they don't come on at the same rate as they were before. So I don't think we're at the point of damaging wells that might be shut in Iran or
Yeah.
not.
Okay.
But you look out at the futures curve, the market's still saying this situation gets resolved out in the future. If you look at December, January contract, you look at the 27 strip, we're still at around $75 a barrel plus or minus. So the market's anticipating that there will be some conclusion, some break at some point, but that seems to be continuing to be pushed out.
Yep.
Because again, and we've said before, this is for the Iranian regime, this is a religious war. And it's not a situation where they ever want to give up their ability or right to enrich uranium and to have a lot of other demands that they've laid on the table. And so it's not your typical negotiation. This is this is not your typical art of the deal. these are not rational people in the sense of what you
Right.
and I normally think about. And and again, their playbook is to stall, 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 and hope that at some point there's pressure on U.S. or who else to sort of make a deal and not go in and ratchet up the attacks or do a full invasion or whatever was on the table or Trump talked about being on the table before. So I think we're a ways from any solution here. Although the latest headline I read this morning was the Iranian president said, "Well, there could be a deal if the U.S. would give up their totalitarianism." Well, again, basically they're saying no.
Yeah, and
We
I
want to maintain
I
all of
saw
our
I saw a
rights.
headline too before we came on about them now doing some exploratory research into whether or not they could possibly think of abandoning their nuclear ambitions. But I mean, give me a break. We've seen this playbook 100 times in the past. This is
Yeah,
stalling.
I mean
They're
this is a religious
do it or
war.
not. Yeah.
It's not verbatim in their constitution, but it's implied that they want to eliminate Israel. And so this is not something with the current regime that's going to be. They're going to go out fighting tooth and nail. So it's just we'll see sort of what
Okay.
happens here, and they've still got a lot of cards. It's not like they don't have cards to play with here. So
Sure.
in the
So
meantime, yes, oil's up sharply this morning. I'm looking at the energy stocks. They were all up sharply to start out the day. They're coming back a little bit here. You know, Again, I think they're still cheap if you're pricing. They're not pricing in where the 27 strip is at $75 oil, but net they're going to move around depending on what the oil price does day to day. And I'm where I've been all along for the last several weeks. We're holding steady. We're not selling anything. I'm not writing any covered calls on anything. I'm not buying anything per se. I'm just holding steady with what we have, which we're up big on, and staying the course till we see some clarity on how all this plays out. But in the
okay,
meantime, with these higher oil prices, they're banking cash every single day. So valuation continues to
for
accrete
sure.
to these stocks at a much higher oil price than where the valuations are today.
Yep. Do you make anything of this armada that's headed to the U.S. to to purchase our oil and gas?
Well,
Is
it's
that going to have any effect on U.S. kind of base stocks? Does it
not
move the
really.
needle at all?
Not really, because it's not like we have excess oil all of a sudden to sell on the world market.
Right.
We're not ratcheting up production in the U.S. It's not a situation where we can go turn on a bunch of wells and weren't flowing before or already.
Exactly.
So, I
So,
mean, on the world
all
market,
right.
I mean, the only thing we can do is with in Europe is continue to release oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. But as far as U.S. production increasing, no. And we still have high demand here, and so it's not like we're going to replace Iran's 1.7 million barrel per day of exports they had before with U.S. crude. And we're not going to take away. There's a geopolitical premium now that's not going away anytime soon, if ever now. Unless
Right.
there is some significant regime change, because there will continue to be, at least in the current situation, the overhang or threat of some closure or impact on the Strait of Hormuz. And now you've thrown in this other the Houthis and the Bab al Mandab Strait. You've thrown that in there as potential disruption too. So this geopolitical premium is not going away. Period.
Yep.
So even if you had all the oil flowing again, and you were able to make up quickly some of the inventories that have been drawn down, you're not going back to $60 oil, which is where we were before this war broke out. We're not. That's not happening anytime soon. Not in any sense
Yeah,
of the
I got
word.
to believe too. This is going to put the Fed in a box even more with inflation staying higher for longer, rates staying higher for longer. I mean, I think right now the market's just seeing this as a short-term shock, but this could this could be much more than this could be much worse than that.
Well, the short term is between now and the midterms, you know, and so that's.
Right.
I mean, that's it. People are paying
Well,
more at the pump, and it's going to flow through
that's
to
the argument to
products.
get
And
this resolved ASAP, right? And that's I
right,
think what the market's banking on.
yeah. And there was one report that Trump was sort of willing to say, okay, well, sort of hit a ceasefire as long as you just open the Strait of Hormuz. And the one report I saw was that uh, MBS called from Saudi Arabia and said, no, don't do that. We got to finish this. We started it. We got to finish it. So don't ease off on that. This has got to keep going until it's done. So,
Yeah.
We'll see how this goes. And, Trump's got to maintain support, not only domestically, but internationally for whatever effort he has going forward, which becomes more and more tenuous the longer this goes on. And that's sort of what I think the Iranians are banking on, is the longer they can stall and stretch this out, the more pressure they hope builds on Trump from international partners or internally politically to sort of back off or reach some deal that still gives them some leverage. So that's part of the risk.
It's not
part
been
of the
good for
strategy
him politically.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's a can of worms. This is not easy to resolve. This is not Venezuela, where you sort of go in and take out the leader and let everybody else kind of run things. This regime is pretty entrenched, and the indoctrination of the people in Iran on what their religious belief is pretty entrenched for the large part or a significant part of the population. So this is not an easy fix.
So you think if Iran stays entrenched here, Trump keeps kicking the can, or he keeps the blockade in place, or what's?
He keeps the blockade in place. I mean, the next step is to sort of squeeze them economically, but I'm not sure that they give in on that. They feel like they're fighting.
They felt pain before.
Yeah, they're fighting a religious war to the end, to the death.
Yep.
So I think there's got to be another step after that. The economic pain, I think they can withstand for a while, and we'll see then. I think the immediate concern for Trump is getting oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz, as you pointed out, to ease oil prices. And then the next step will be, okay, how do we get a deal or get to a point where Iran no longer has the ability to enrich uranium and have a nuclear weapon? And I think we're far from that deal being in place.
Yep. All right, let's wrap it up there, Bob. Good show, good feedback, good insights. Nothing to do on the oil and gas names.
Keep your eye on any tweets from Trump on social media, on his true social media. That's the one thing that could swing the market any time. So
I saw him going after the Pope this weekend, adding that to Tucker and Megyn Kelly and all these other people he's been going after.
Yep.
So, all right. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Jen. We will catch you back here tomorrow on Wall Street Beats. Follow us on wallstreetbeats.com and have a great Monday.